Everybody. Today we're going to be looking at scroll saw and bandsaw safety, which is the next set of tools and equipment that we're going to be looking at over the first couple of weeks of fabrication. So just a quick little overview. Over on the left side of the screen here, this is one of our scroll saws. Scroll saws have a very thin blade used for making very detailed cuts. So one of our project options is the name plaque that would be fabricated on the scroll saw. Over on the right here, this is our bandsaw. Uses a oval shaped blade, circular blade that runs on two wheels. And this is used for making more curved cuts. For example, the shelf project, to do our shelf ends and our backer, that would be cut out using the bandsaw. So let's get started. So looking at the scroll saw, your power switch is right on the top. The speed control is right on the back. There's a dial, and that would be used for, depending on the type of material, thickness of material, how fast you'd want your speed to be running. This is your on. This hold down adjustment prevents your fingers from going into the blade, and it also, if you ever let go of your piece, prevents your piece from jumping up and down. If you're wondering what this hose is, this actually blows air to keep the sawdust off of your cutting lines, so you can make sure you can see exactly what you're doing. I do have a light that's attached to the back of these DeWalt's. You'll see that in the shop when you return to school. So a couple of safety rules to remember with the scroll saw. Always check to see that the teeth of the blade are pointed downward. Okay, you always want the teeth to be pointed downward because as the blade moves up and down, you want that to be cutting as the blade's moving downward. If it were to be, if the teeth of the blade were pointed upward, it's going to want to lift your piece off of that work table. Always hold the wood firmly on the table so that it does not move up and down with the motion of the blade. If you've never seen a scroll saw or a jigsaw, it moves in a motion like this. I have put a couple of video links on Schoology or you take a quick look at of the scroll saw and bandsaw. So that'll probably make more sense for that safety rule once you take a look at those videos. Always keep fingers away from the front or teeth of the blade. So the teeth of the blade is actually what's doing the cutting. You always want your hands off to the side or behind, never in front of the blade. Always stand up straight when using the scroll saw. If your head is directly over the blade and it breaks, you could be injured. Avoid twisting the blade by making too sharp of a turn because it will break. Narrow blades can make sharper turns than wider ones. All the blades that we're using are 1/8 inch blades, so you can cut some pretty good turns on those, but you never want to abruptly turn your piece of material, otherwise, again, the blade can break. Always keep your eyes on your work at all times when using the scroll saw. Feed wood into the saw only as fast as the machine will allow it to cut. So we're cutting anywhere from 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch material. Because that's such a thin blade, you have to allow the saw time to actually cut through that. It's not going to cut as quickly as the bandsaw or the miter saw or the table saw would. Round pieces are never cut on the scroll saw, so we always want to cut flat pieces that can sit flat on our tabletop. Slow down when nearing the end of your cut. All machine defects, including broken blades, need to be reported to the teacher. So if you ever accidentally break a blade, obviously please communicate that to me. I can get those replaced pretty quickly. All scrap pieces need to be placed in the scrap box when finished. So next to all of our scroll saws that we have at school, we do have a scrap bin for all our scraps. We never want to throw those on the floor or leave them on the machine. Before you start the scroll saw, you should check the hold down adjustment to see that it clears your project. So just to jump back here, this hold down adjustment, there's a little wing nut on here that allows this to move up the hold down adjustment when the saw is running. So moving on to the bandsaw. Bandsaw, basically you have a power switch over on the left side of the machine here. This is your table that you'll be laying your material on. And then your blade, as you turn that on, it runs the video on the bandsaw underneath our Schoology page. So if you want to take a quick look at that, it's really in depth of the parts and how the bandsaw actually works. So I'm just going to focus on the safety rules in this presentation. Check the following before starting the bandsaw. See that the throat is clear. The throat of the machine is where the blade goes through the table. So remember, this blade runs all the way around. Oftentimes little scrap pieces can get caught in between here, and your blade, sometimes the blade won't even start if there's a larger piece jammed in there. So always check the throat before starting. See that the blade clears the upper and lower guides. So the upper and lower guides are adjustment on the scroll saw. You always want to make sure your piece of material is going to fit through the opening. So this actually adjusts up and down. There's a little knot once we get to back to school. See that the table is free of all material except what's being cut. So we always don't want to ever put tools or anything on the work table. We always want to make sure that that's clear. See that the floor is clear around the saw. That's just a general safety rule. See that the upper guide down adjustment before you start up the bandsaw. You just want to make sure that the board will clear the upper guide that protects the blade. Couple more safety rules. Start cutting after the saw has gained full speed. So when you power on the bandsaw, it takes a second or two before it reaches full speed. Always want to give that a second or two just so we don't put strain on the motor. Avoid backing out of long cuts. Cut your way out of scrap. So you never want to try to back out of a really long cut. If you do, you could run the risk of twisting the blade. When you're backing out of shortcuts, use caution and follow the original cutting path without putting pressure on the blade. So if you do need to back out of a shorter cut, just make sure you're not twisting your piece of material. And there's more about that in the video that I posted on the Schoology page. Use blades narrow enough for the curve being cut. Avoid really sharp turns with the bandsaw. So the bandsaws that we have, I have either a 3/8 or 1/2 inch blade. You are not going to be able to cut very detailed cuts with the bandsaw because the blade is just too wide. That's what the scroll saw would be used for. Always use a fence for ripping and resawing. So a fence, similar to a fence on a table saw, and they'll show you this in the video. Basically, you can set that to a dimension. So if you wanted to cut like a 3-inch piece, you can set your fence at 3 inches away from the blade, push your piece through, holding it against that fence, and it's going to cut you a 3-inch piece. Material that does not have a flat edge should not be cut on the saw. So same thing as the scroll saw, we always want pieces that'll lay flat on our work table when we're cutting. Let's see. Always keep fingers in. So I think that's a pretty obvious thing. You never want to have your fingers near the blade. Avoid cutting small pieces so fingers don't get too close to the blade. Clear scraps away with a stick or scrap wood, not your fingers. So there's push sticks, and on laying on all our saws that we have in the wood shop, you always want to use that instead of your fingers. Never want to run the risk of putting your fingers near the blade. If the blade makes a clicking sound, stop the saw and tell the teacher. So remember, this is a circular shaped blade. If it's making a clicking, usually that's as it's running through that upper and lower guide. We obviously, if you hear a clicking, shut the machine off, let me know. Usually that blade is either bent or it needs to be replaced. If the blade breaks, turn off the machine and get the teacher. So if for some reason the blade were to snap, obviously you want to shut the bandsaw off, come get me, and we'll get that replaced. Always keep wheel cover guards closed when the saw is running. So the wheels run underneath, or I'm sorry, the wheels run behind these guard covers. These do open up for maintenance. We always want to make sure that in the video that I posted, which I keep referring to, they will show you that. So, on the scroll saw and bandsaw test, there are 25 questions. This is a challenging test because there's a lot of things to remember when using these saws. You need to score a 21 out of 25 or better in order to pass, 85%. So I have posted the test on Schoology. If you have any questions, out to me during our class times during Zoom, or if you're completing this outside of class, you can always send me an email. Good luck, everybody, and we'll see you in class.